Welcome to the YoggNation, the Spirit of Gratitude podcast on the One Integration platform. Hello, friends. My name is Yogesh Patel, and this podcast explores the themes of bullying, self-awareness, and the power of our inner spirit, including the silent battles we all face. Join me every week as I invite high-profile guests as we explore how adversity shapes us, how gratitude lifts us, and how we can all uncover the inner strength that we all have within ourselves. Join the conversation. I appreciate you listening in.
How many people do you know who can take apart and rebuild every nut and bolt of a century-old car? For all you history lovers and car buffs, my next guest is someone very special. Alan Travis isn't just a collector. He's a storyteller who brings 100-year-old cars back to life, piece by piece. His passion, and you'll see why on this episode, has reached over 50 million views online in just the last 2 years, as he's been featured on Jay Leno's Garage, The Guild in Canada, and ESPN Radio. But here's what makes him unforgettable. Alan opens his door on his Scottsdale, Arizona home, which he calls a collection, to share these treasures to everyone, and boy is it impressive. When he restores a car, he just doesn't tune it up. He takes them apart, sometimes over 3,500 individual pieces, and brings history roaring back to life. With that, with gratitude, welcome to the podcast, Alan.
Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure and my honor. So got a side question to ask you, Alan. Could you take apart a modern F1 car driven by the likes of Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen?
No, because it's not exciting. That was created just a few years ago. Most of my cars and vehicles are 125. My newest ones are 110 years old, and they're kind of boring. I like the ones that are 120 to 125 years old. And the masters and the inventors mind all in one piece created those. And I try to put myself back in the same mindset as those people back then. That's why I read all my 8,500 books and magazines. And then all those magazines are 1895 to 1915. So if I'm going to do a 1902 car or motorcycle, I'll get out 100 magazines, 1902 and earlier, and 50 hardbacks. And then I'll read those, put myself in that mindset. And then what I've learned to do is make sure when I'm doing the 1902 vehicle, I don't look ahead and get some 1903 and 1904 magazines out, because maybe they've perfected something a little bit better. I don't want to be there. I want to do it.
Well, what's the appeal? Is it the engineering behind it? Is it the historical record at the time? What draws your interest to these very vintage treasures?
Well, these I choose and I seek all over the world, is what I've done, is the first and the oldest of each invention, production vehicle. And most of the time, the people, if it was a Girac vehicle or a Renault vehicle or a Bugatti vehicle, Andre Michelin was there working on it. Mr. Pietro Bugatti worked on that car, and his initials are on there. So it's the passion of those people creating that vehicle for the next person to own. And the next person to own, they created these cars for a lifetime. That's why there's so much hands-on craftsmanship. And then you're taking that apart, maybe for the first time in 120 years, and then you're not trying to modify it. You're not trying to make a hot rod. You're rebuilding what they created for you to have.
That's amazing. And if these cars can talk, what would they say?
They do talk. You find trials and tribulations, and after you get one done, you read the next year's magazines or books. You find out what they changed and all. And they like Pietro Bugatti. We have the oldest Bugatti Grand Prix car. He decided that he was going to sell them to the pilots, the aces at the time, the 1912, 13, 14 pilots, because those are the people that are courageous enough to race his Bugatti. And then to get a car from him, you had to go to a chateau in France. You had to ride thoroughbreds in the morning. And then in the afternoon, you flew your airplane a little bit in the airfield that was around there. And then you had a lesson, an hour or two with a car. And you repeated that for 30 days. And when he thought you were eligible and worthy of the car that he created for you, you could have it. But there's no dealerships, there's no car lots. You maybe you had an agent that would talk to you, to Bugatti, that you would be a likely candidate to own one, but you didn't. You couldn't just go get one. You couldn't just go get one. There was no manufacturing at the time. So that's what my cars and motorcycles are.
So you feel the weight of history.
Well, I do. And when I start a car, when I start a restoration, for example, the Bugatti, since we mentioned that one first, there's hundreds of people in the world know that, okay, Alan Travis has the oldest Bugatti Grand Prix car, and he thinks he's going to restore it. So it's like everybody in the world is watching me, and if I screwed up, Alan Travis screwed it up. So that's why I spent so many hours on that one. And then I got it all done, and it's perfect. And I've raced international Bugatti Grand Prix at Lime Rock and Watkins Glen and Laguna Seca. I've taken it on 500-mile tours. I've done mountain climbs. So they know that I got it done. In fact, something bad happened a couple of years ago. We were on a tour in Paso Robles, California, and then we were driving it spiritedly in the mountain roads. And I broke an axle on it, going fast on the high-speed roads, which means if you break an axle, your tire and the wheel fly off and you're skidding on the road. And so people were, online would say, Alan Travis ruined a multi-million-dollar car, say. I mean, a few said that. And then other people would chime in and say, yeah, but he's the one that restored it. Just wait. So within a month, I had it all repaired, and I just had to wait for the fender to get painted. And now we're using it again. It's perfect again. So you live the same history that they lived back then, because it's not different. It's the same. And the last answer to that question is every one of my 25, 100 and some year old vehicles, they exactly run like they did back 120 years ago. The same driving experience. If I gave you the owner's manual and you translated it from French or German or whatever it is, the same buttons you push, the same levers you toggle are exactly what you do today. If it didn't have a windshield back 125 years ago, it doesn't today. And you have the exact same experience. So if I gave you the magazine and gave you the experience, it's the same.
Well, and again, you just don't fix these vehicles, right? These cars. You research their history and honor the owners who come before. And I think you mentioned that earlier. What's the most moving story you've uncovered while restoring one of these classics?
I guess my 1905 Mitchell was the first car in Northern California. It was bought by the mine superintendent for the Orville mines actually in the Dredgerville, which is in the stream. It was the first car in Butte County, and then the lake or the river in Oroville flooded in February of 1906. That when it flooded, it killed 25% of the people in the town in Dredgerville, which is right 100 yards from Oroville. But in the summertime, when the water receded, the townspeople went back and got the car out of the river. So it was submerged in the river for 6 months. The car only had a few thousand miles on it, but the townspeople and the family cherished it so much they drug it out. They put it in a basement of a house. It stayed there till 1990. This car, and then it's right behind me. It's that one there. In fact, I'll get a picture real quick. This is the picture of how I got it. And then I told him when I bought it that I would have it done in a month or so, a couple months, and I'd bring it back to them and give them all rides in their car. Why did it stay in the basement from 1906 to 1990? Because nobody was born in their family that could fix it and restore it. So they kept waiting for other people to be born. More and more and more, they had many generations. And my title for the car is 1905, and the same title has the title of the house on it. Same address, same property. So I got it all done. I brought it back to them, and then I dressed them all up in fancy hats and lace and all that stuff. Gave them all rides. That's just one story that every one of these has the same story. It wasn't a wealthy family, but they had so much passion for that car, even in that condition. They kept it in the garage for 115 years before I even got it to restore it.
Incredible. Incredible. Well, and what do you think are the parallels in restoring a car and restoring a person's life from a hardship or challenge experience? Because, again, what this podcast aims to do, Alan, is to provide inspiration, education, entertainment, which I'm getting a lot of that right now. But more importantly, discover something about yourself. And so, what I like to do is I like to bring these diverse guests and with their passions, be able to connect the dots in terms of how what they do on a regular basis influences and affects their self-awareness, their inner spirit, their sense of gratitude. So curious to find out, again, going back to the original question, the parallels that you see in restoring a car versus restoring a person's perhaps mental and or physical health.
None of my vehicles have been restored from derelicts. They were always cherished. They were always, even if they got in derelict condition, they were always kept back in their barn or their building or their garage somewhere or another for 100 and some years. So when I restore a car, I do complete vehicles and I don't hunt things. So I start with at least the mass of the vehicle. I guess the only time I've ever had any issue ever, when you ask if I ever had a hardship, I don't count it as a hardship. I'm an engineer, but I had a triple bypass 21 years ago. And then they take your heart out and they put new veins and that kind of stuff in. And then the worst thing that anybody ever told me ever in my whole life was when I woke up, an hour after I woke up, they said, well, from now on, you can start doing scrapbooking and you'll be fine if you scrapbook, but you need to just do that. Relax. Don't. And that was the worst possible thing somebody could tell me. So in the hospital bed, I started entering triathlons, marathons, 10Ks. I even entered Ironman. So I was not going to do scrapbooking. So the same thing on the cars. There's maybe you could take apart any of the cars and make something else out of them. But the cars are the same core of them being perfectly fine, just a little bit of effort put onto them, then they're exactly as brand new again as I was by starting to do my running and my marathons and my triathlons and things. So I never, ever did the scrapbooking.
I guess to me, it also speaks to don't listen to your detractors.
And Dr. Dietrich himself did the surgery, and I've outlived all of the doctors. I play pickleball every day. I do everything. We hike. We do all of it. So and the same thing as my cars, they do all of it. If I want to take any car, an 1895 car, and I want to go to Costco tonight. In fact, my wife's at an event tonight. I may take one of the cars that's 120 years old and I may go out to dinner with it because they're back to perfect again. Like what I am from 21 years ago having my triple bypass. It's the same thing. That's the parallel that I draw.
And you've dreamt about owning cars ever since you were a young teenager.
Oh, way earlier than that. It was in the 1950s. I was 5 or 6 years old.
Wow. Well, what does it look? Give us that sense of perspective, Alan, when you wrote down the cars that you were dreaming of owning, you happen to have it. So what does that journey from imagination to reality teach this next generation about dreaming big with the power of belief?
When I was 4 or 5 years old, I would write poems and little short stories for the back cover of the Arizona Republic next to the crossword puzzles. They would also, in that same back page, they would have comics of antique cars. And I got interested in antique cars at 5 years old by those comics, which were Tad Burness drawings. They weren't actual photos of cars. And then I started reading all the specs because I was always an engineering type kid. And then I got a book. My grandfather in the 50s, 1958 or 59, gave me the Tad Burness book. And I put all my clippings in that book, which I still have today, which I showed you. And then I started writing down the cars that I wanted, I wrote down 25 cars, which is about what I have today. Now, I've learned a little bit from when I was 4 or 5 years old to in my 70s. So I have replaced a few of those names and brands with other names and brands. So in my overall simple mind, I got 17 or 18 of those cars. In fact, I have none of them, but I have the the start of the conversation by my handwriting when I was 5 years old on this car and that car and the other car. But I've gotten in the last 50 years, I want to go older and older and older. So I want the oldest ones in the world, which weren't actually presented to me when I was 5 years old.
Yeah. Do you think you're just lucky that you found your passion early on? Because again, what I'm trying to do is also draw parallels to folks that perhaps may not know what their North Star is, and finding avenues like this podcast to help them explore or rediscover their passions. I think there's something to be said about what you're good at internally and letting that shine.
I had 5 or 6 times in my life that simple sentences or simple motions led my life the way where it is today. Boy Scouts, merit badges. Okay, you can get merit badges. You can be an Eagle Scout, and every one of the merit badges you learn knot tying, electronics, and this and that and the other. So when I was 8 or 9 years old, I took a merit badge for electronics, and then that was great. So when I was seventh grade, I started studying for my first class FCC license, which is the highest level engineering license for being an engineer at a radio and TV station. And I got that license when I was in 8th grade. So the little hint of achieving something really meant a lot to me. If I could achieve something, something my father said, or my mom and dad said when I was 13 years old, when I was kind of looking at cars, way too early to drive. But my parents said, well, you can't have a car unless you have a brand new car, and you have to have enough money saved for your insurance and all. So that next day, I started doing yard work for people. I planted people's petunias. I took care of pets. I was substitute for paper routes. And by the time I was 14, I had enough money to buy a new car and to loan my parents enough for a motorhome. So just a little pushes, like the triple bypass thing, the little push of the scrapbook, in my rebellious nature, allowed me to be an achiever.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily rebellious. I just think that it was good parenting along with environment and a little bit of perhaps stubbornness, as I like to call. This is great. This is amazing, Alan. Thanks for sharing all this perspective again. For those listeners that are out there, I mean, what we're seeing is really history in motion, history in the making, through the lens of what Alan is doing to help restore these classic and vintage cars. And speaking of which, you're part of a Bugatti, well, I like to pronounce it Bugatti, car club that helped raise and donate a lot of money towards McPherson College in Kansas to inspire students. And so why was it so important for you to tie your legacy to education?
I've got to instill my passion into these vehicles. Otherwise, where are they going to go? If they go to a museum, they die. Because there's nobody in a museum, there's no docent that can start these and run these and drive these and jump these and do the things that I've done. I've crossed Australia, the Outback. We've done the Great American Race many times. I've done London, Brighton. I mean, it's not that they look good. You have to use them. So the parallel for McPherson College is that McPherson College, we gave them a lot of money, and we instructed, I didn't, but the people in the Bugatti Club instructed them to make a manual for the race cars for the pre-World War I racing Bugattis. So they spent 6 months, the students did that. And it turned out I have the only one in the world that's running. So there's none of them. So I decided that since I was going back to Watkins Glen for International Bugatti Grand Prix, Watkins Glen is in New York, I would bring my car, and then I know Kansas has to be halfway or along the way. So I called McPherson College and I said, I'll bring a Bugatti to your college. I don't know what you have for me, but I can just drop it off, or I can, talk about it a little bit. So we go there, and then they say, you can have a half hour from 9 to 9:30 in the morning on the Friday that I got there. So I got there Thursday night, I dropped it off, and then I had a lot of students surround the car and ask me questions. So the next morning, I got there at 9 o'clock, and then I had 150 students around me asking me questions. And it continued for another hour, and I had 200 or 300 students in the round, as it turned out. And then the students, the dean was going to have a dean report or a dean celebration at noon, where the dean talks to all the students and encourages them to be good and to continue their studies and learn restoration and all. So as it turned out, in the round, it kept going on 10, 10:30, at 11 o'clock. They released every one of the classes, all 800 students, to me and to this big room that the Bugatti was in the center of, and I was in the center of, in the round. So then at 11:30, the dean came to me and two of the teachers that had been there for 40 years, and they said, "We've never seen this before. We know the students know you, and we know that they know you know for every aspect about restoration and the history and the passion and painting and the parts and rebuilding the engines and all. But we've never seen students ever be so incredibly interested in a speaker. Normally our students, in 5 minutes, they start kind of rotating around. In 6 minutes, they start looking at their phone. 7 or 8, 9 minutes, they start giggling or whispering. We saw none of that. And there's hundreds of people around you. I'm going to make an announcement," the dean said. "I'm going to make an announcement that we're canceling the dean's talk today. We're going to continue with you till 12 or 12:30. Whenever the students get tired of this, we have never seen this in 40 years where the students are so interested." So that's one of the many, many goosebump times in my life, that sharing information on what I learned and what I love is really helping people. And then the next year, so let's skip that a minute, that it was fabulous. So the next year, McPherson College called and they said, "We'd like to bring 12 of our top students, 12 of our top donors, and 12 of the top families with those students and 5 or 6 teachers. We want to fly them all from Kansas to Scottsdale, and for you to give our group a presentation of your collection. We think that's the best thing in the world." And they did that, and there was another goosebump minute, which lasted 2 or 3 hours also. So it just, sharing is really important, because I know that at least 800 students that go to Kansas, to McPherson College, are going to be a nice stewards of our hobby and our vehicles.
Yeah. And I'm sure just seeing these students' their eyes light up, I'm sure that probably was one of those goosebump moments that you just mentioned.
So in our hobby, to me, money and what something might or might not be worth has nothing to do with it. It's all of the stuff, all the other stuff. So it's somebody just the opposite of me, but somebody that people might think is similar to me. Somebody might buy a car for $1 million at an auction and put it in their living room, and then show people from time to time, "Look at what I have in my living room." Well, my cars aren't in my living room. My cars are driven, get dirty, leak, are registered, insured. We go on rallies and tours and take them to elementary schools, and we really, really enjoy and use our vehicles.
Do you think there's a parallel? Maybe not the right word. I'm just trying to think of the idea that I'm trying to express. And so you have the old that is maybe brushing against the new being what today's technology is: computers, social media, the F1s, the modern F1s, as you said, that they're boring because of all the computer stuff. But there seems to be a romanticism, right, of the past. And I think that's what you bring out in your talks and in these field trips that people come to your collection.
A good story in that is Penske has a beautiful museum really close to us up here in Scottsdale. They have 20 or 30 million or 50 million, a lot of value were the cars. Next to it is the Bugatti dealership. 3 years ago, they brought out the new Veyron, the new $5 million Bugatti. And then Penske had contacted me to greet the guests and have something in the parking lot of one of my things as kind of a VIP. They had Bob Bondurant there too. And so I brought the Bugatti, just brought that. So the Bugatti dealership, which is right next to the Penske Museum, had the new Veyron. So they came out and said, "We'd like to park our new, fancy, unbelievable Bugatti next to your Bugatti, because we're going to have all the dealers from all over the world come to our dealership to learn the car and learn the passion that we're going to place on our car, but it hadn't earned what we're going to place on our car, and if they can see yours too, okay, fine. So they bring that, and they're both parked out there, and there's 2 spots in between the 2 cars, and I got there an hour and a half early. So everybody that was showing up was around my 1913 Bugatti, and it seemed like they were almost standing on the Verone looking at my car. Nobody was looking at it at all, and they had invited me to the breakfast for the Bugatti dealers the next morning. They finally came out about half hour later, said, "We're taking our Bugatti, we're putting it back in. Nobody's looking at our car," because it doesn't have that passion. It doesn't have the history. It doesn't have what you need. Yeah, you have a price of $5 million, but it has no value.
No, that is such a neat story. Wow, not many people can tell that. That's for sure. With the amount of knowledge and experience you have. And speaking of knowledge and experience, a hypothetical here. You and your friend comedian Jay Leno are sitting in a bar. What do you talk about in reference to this future of car culture and the ability to inspire people?
I won't do the bar thing because he doesn't drink and I don't either. But we can still take care of this. So I did some Jay Leno's garages, and then I get there at 8 in the morning, and I'm there till 8:30 at night. And then I can do anything I want there. We're on the same level because we both know everything about our subject. So a parallel to that question is we did a video on the Bugatti, that's got 800,000 or 900,000 things from it. And then we're in the car, and the entire day from 8 in the morning till 8:30 at night, Jay Leno says not one joke, none, because we had 23 people there for CNBC. We had directors, producers, we had cameramen, people, and women, and all of it. And we carried all the cameras. And then the director called the next day and said, we've done 500 of these Jay Leno garages, and there's always big voids because the people that own the cars don't know Jay's questions. So he fills in the blanks with comical things. He says, we've been looking at the tapes from yesterday, and there was not a single time that he gave a joke at all. He says, you guys could have gone on forever. Also, he said, normally he just drives around the block, but he drove your car for 42 miles. Everybody had to go to the restroom and wanted to eat, and he drove yours till 9 o'clock at night, where you turned on the lights. He would not stop driving it. It's like you guys have known each other for 100 years. So we talk about everything, the passionate part of the cars. It's just solid. It's just solid, and it's so rewarding.
Well, I think it also, that passion amplifies, right? I mean, beyond just the staff on the show, but I guess it's the viewers as well, because I happened to watch that episode and it's like, wow, this was really awesome to not only see it in person, but to see it being filmed, driving on what was it, Mulholland Drive or
everywhere, up, down the hills and valleys, just everywhere. And even to this day, he could be in a line to sign 100 people's autographs, but he'll see me in the background and he'll say, "Hey, Alan," and run over to me and says, "How's the Type 22?" And then he'll call my phone or email, or it's just amazing. He also donates his time for McPherson College too. There's a museum that wants he and I to be curators of it. And then we had a big meeting last year, and he said, just let Alan. Alan knows more. Just have Alan do it. And Jay is an unbelievable person. I mean, he's not a rich person or a famous person. He might be, but he's a passionate person for cars. And you see that every time he shows up anywhere. That's what people know him as.
Well, I think wealth is defined as not necessarily the bank balance that you have, but getting into your passions, your ability to give back, your spirituality, all these different pillars that I think you certainly exemplify. This is incredible. And final question: you had mentioned your surgery, the open heart surgery, and
Triple bypass. If that's
bypass. Thank you. Yes. And I think it goes back to one of the earlier questions I had around our pre-planning call, and that is, you never worry. Is that, did I read that correctly? And if so, how do you manage a bad day, and how could people learn, what would be the takeaway of this type of thought process that I'm sure it's probably you train your mind to think this.
It's an engineering process. So if you're an engineer and you go to college to be an engineer, I was, lots of time you're an engineer way before that, or you're a farmer, you're an engineer. It's the same thing. It's kind of the same. Uh, there's no obstacle. You can solve everything. So by that mentality, whether it's a financial thing or a health thing or a car thing or a mechanical thing or machining thing, I can get it done. Today we mounted a incredible fancy headlight on a car and there's no mount for it. Okay, fine. I'll start with a piece of bronze and start putting it on the mill, and I have it done when I get done.
Emotions are different.
Well, I'm just always positive. I don't get down. Maybe I have a wonderful wife that we've been married 50 years so far, and we've done everything together, and it's still just positive. It's just simply positive.
And I think that is certainly a key message on this podcast that you just highlighted. Alan, this was a tremendous honor and pleasure to have you once again. Thank you for your time. And for those citizens of YoggNation who are perhaps in Arizona, Scottsdale, more information on where you could see these beauties that Alan has rightfully preserved and restored, that information will be out. But again, it's amazing. You have to see it for your own eyes. Alan, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye for now.